prayer-filled, spirit-filled believer.
I will. Goodness.
Thank you, Dale.
Heavenly Father, we thank you very much for tonight. We just ask that as Pastor opens up the word to us, we just ask that you just open up our minds, open up our hearts, give us understanding and wisdom. Lord, and come in and give you a news report of what's going on, so we just ask that you just take care of it. We love you and praise you in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Hey, that was excellent.
Okay. So open with the Word of God. See what God has to say to us tonight.
See what God has.
Avert misunderstanding by calm, poise, and balance.
No, it doesn't say that.
It does. Zoom in on that. And your lucky numbers are 27, 16, 8, and 9.
27.
May God bless to us the reading of the Word.
You eat those things?
Wow!
Yeah.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Good, yeah.
It's like sweet cardboard.
Yeah, got a little bit of sweetness to it. Yeah.
Well, with that,
It's a taste that develops.
I'll keep the second out.
Did you bring those too? What? Did you bring those?
That's
Last week I summarized chapter 16 to 17, but we need to look at them for some reason this week. Just revisiting it, I feel like we're going to actually go into detail. Chapter 16, 2 Samuel, first 4 verses. If someone would read those, please.
When David had gone a little beyond the summit on the Mount of Olives, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, was waiting there for him. He had 2 donkeys loaded with 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisins, 100 bunches of summer fruit, and a wineskin full of wine. "What are these for?" the king asked Ziba. Ziba replied, "The donkeys are for the king's people to ride on. The bread and summer fruit are for the young men to eat. The wine is for those who become exhausted in the wilderness." "And where is Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson?" the king asked him. "He stayed in Jerusalem," Ziba replied. He said, "Today I will get back the kingdom of my grandfather Saul." In that case, the king told Ziba, "I give you everything Mephibosheth owns." "I bow before you," Ziba replied. "May I always be pleasing to you, my lord the king."
You remember Ziba? Remember that name? Ziba and Mephibosheth? Remember? Back in chapter 9, remember David's on the throne, and he says, is there anybody left of Saul's family that I can show kindness to? Right? Because even though Saul was out to kill him all that long time, David still, he's just David. He's got a heart, especially loved his best friend Jonathan, Saul's son, and a man named Ziba, who was a servant of Saul in Saul's house. He says, well, king, actually there is one more person alive in Saul's line, and it's Mephibosheth, and he lives down the road. He's at this place, and he's actually in the, if you remember, the city called Lo-Debar, place of no communication.
no communication.
Outcast place. So David said, bring him to me. And Mephibosheth, if you remember the whole story, it's amazing how he comes before the king. King brings him in as like one of his own sons. And Mephibosheth, who should have been the heir to the throne, he was the heir to the throne. He's in the palace that should have been his. Saul, Jonathan, Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth says, I'm a dog. I'm no better than a dog. You know, if you throw scraps at me, I'll be blessed. But David takes him, sits him at his table, treats him as one of his sons, and he sits now as a prince among the actual princes of the king, King David. Well, what you just read was that as David is now fleeing from Absalom, remember this is his son who's out to dethrone him and kill him, and David has scaled the Mount of Olives. He's coming to the summit, and he is greeted by, of all people, Ziba. Oh yeah, here's the guy that told him about Mephibosheth. And what does Ziba have for him? Okay, he's got a bunch of supplies because they're going to need them. They've hit the road. Who knows how long they're going to be off by themselves, maybe banished forever. Nobody knows at this point. Nobody knows if David might return. Right now, it just looks like David just feels like he's been ousted, but somebody's taking care of him, and how nice that is. And then David asks about Mephibosheth. And he said, where's Mephibosheth? Because, two of you kind of hang out all the time, don't you? And what does Ziba say?
Staying in Jerusalem.
And he thinks he's
Why is he
gonna,
there? Because he said, verse what?
gonna throw him back.
Because he said,
Today the house of
Gonna get
Israel
everything
restored
back.
the kingdom of my father to me.
did you catch that? So Mephibosheth now thinks the kingdom's going to actually be his, not Absalom's. What? What?
Away from being scribes.
Sounds like what?
YouTube.
You too.
All different ideas of what's going to happen.
Right, that's fine. So Mephibosheth, again, here's a guy who had the busted feet as a child, okay? He was crippled, maimed, couldn't walk. He went from Lodebar. It's a Cinderella story. He's there in the palace now with David. David's, though, fleeing Mephibosheth. Instead of going, David, hey, you're my dad. You were my dad's best friend. I'm going to see you as like my dad. You've seen me as like your son. I'm going to love you like you're my daddy. Think about it. That's not what he does. He goes, aha! It's my chance. I'm going to be the king. What? Human nature. Right. All of a sudden he thinks he's going to be the king. And David says to Ziba, well, everything that I had given to Mephibosheth, I now give to you.
You're the king.
Oh, that's dirty.
That's what he did, right? That's very interesting. Just,
But now he's got an enemy.
Yeah, right. So you go,
Another
okay,
one.
buddy, talk about, ingratitude. So he gives it to somebody who he thinks is more worthy. Okay, 5-8, please.
When King David came to Bahurim, behold, there came out from there a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera. He came out cursing continually as he came. He threw stones at David and at all the servants of King David. And all the people and all the mighty men were at his right hand and at his left. Thus Shimei said when he cursed, get out, you man of bloodshed and worthless fellow. The Lord has returned upon you all the bloodshed of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. And the Lord has given the kingdom into the hand of your son Absalom. And behold, you are taken in your own evil, for you are a man of bloodshed. Then Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over now and cut off his head. But the king said, what have I to do with you, O sons of Zeruiah? If he curses, and if the Lord has told him, curse David, then who shall say, why have you done so? Then David said to Abishai and to all his servants, behold, my son who came out from me seeks my life. How much more now this Benjaminite? Let him alone and let him curse, for the Lord has told him. Perhaps the Lord will look on my affliction and return good to me instead of his cursing this day. So when David and his men went on the way, and Shimei went along on the hillside parallel with him, and as he went he cursed and cast stones and threw dust at him. The king and all the people who were with him arrived weary, and he refreshed himself there.
Okay, so Adam Schiff is throwing stones. And David is feeling, quite defeated. Imagine how defeated he is feeling to let this guy,
Get away with it.
just keep learning. This guy just hawk his stones at them. And, he's got Abishai who says, why do you let this guy let me just go chop off his head? And David says what?
No. God's son is going.
He says, for all I know, God sent the guy to curse me.
Yeah.
Have you ever had days where you just feel like you're just so beat up and things have been so terrible, and then something bad's happened to you and you feel like, I deserve it, so you just let it happen, and you don't silence that voice. You don't have anything left in you to defend yourself. And then when somebody wants to defend you, you just go, it's not worth it. I deserve it. Maybe it's from God anyway. Anybody been there?
Yeah.
Y'all been there. Until the rocks throw rocks at you. You go. Wow. And, and he says, my own son wants to kill me. I mean, does it get worse than that? I mean, so what? This guy's throwing rocks. My own son wants to kill me. I deserve it. And he's listening to all these accusations. I wonder if he's starting to believe the bad press. Maybe I haven't been good for the nation. Because that's what this guy is saying. You're bloodthirsty. You're terrible for us. You were a terrible king. Just looking at the scriptures, I go, I wonder what does Donald Trump think? I wonder if he ever, he's very, very confident. He's always been confident. I wonder, is he confident tonight? How's he feeling tonight? Talk about stone throwers.
Yeah.
This David's just got one. Now he's got one guy out to kill him. I think there's a whole bunch of people out to kill Donald Trump, if they could. I wonder, one of the death threats that he's had for years. And the stone throwers now, oh my gosh, he just got impeached today by the House. I mean, again, talk about bullies, right? I mean, what are they going to let up? I mean, he's on his way out, apparently.
You say
But they
they,
don't.
I hope he's not. I'm still praying for a last minute miracle where something happens. We all go, yes, I knew it! And he does whatever he does.
Right.
And the National Guard's going to D.C. because actually they're going to really drain the swamp and take him to Gitmo. But,
Please, Lord.
yeah, we're going to waterboard you. We're going to baptize you by waterboarding, Pelosi. Bam!
but they got it done?
What?
Huh?
They got it done, though?
In the
House
house.
of Representatives.
Yeah.
The impeachment?
But
Yeah, in the House.
But the
Now
Senate's
it's
not
going to go to
coming.
the Senate, whatever. I mean, you just go. Again, they're whatever.
Yeah.
There we go then.
Th-
Okay.
yeah, this is not
so
tonight.
absurd, so ridiculous, and so
But somebody's
I don't have
filing,
a vocabulary.
somebody's filing papers of impeachment against Biden on the first day of his a Republican.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, good.
She announced it today.
Really?
What was her name? What was
Good.
her
You know,
name?
we'll go anywhere. It's funny. Okay. So here we go. 15 to 23. Somebody, please.
Meanwhile, Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel was with him. And so it was when Hushai the Archite, David's friend, came to Absalom, that Hushai said to Absalom, "Long live the king, long live the king." So Absalom said to Hushai, "Is this your loyalty to your friend? Why did you not go with your friend?" And Hushai said to Absalom, "No, but whom the Lord and his people and all the men of Israel choose, his I will be, and with him I will remain. Furthermore, whom shall I serve? Should I not serve in the presence of his son? As I have served in your father's presence, so will I be in your presence." Then Absalom said to, I have trouble with that, Ahithophel, "Give advice as to what we should do." And Ahithophel said to Absalom, "Go to your father's concubines, whom he has left to keep the house, and all Israel will hear that you are informed by your father. Then the hands of all who are with you will be strong." So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the top of the house, and Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. Now the advice of Ahithophel, which he gave in those days, was as if one had inquired at the oracle of God. So was all the advice of Ahithophel, both with David and with Absalom. My goodness.
All right. So
Right?
You know, Ahithophel, he's got this advice for Absalom. Hey, let's rub your dad's nose and everything. You know, there's no worse, perhaps, insult or showing dominance or whatever than you, again, we talked about this last week, than you sleeping with his concubines, the second-class wives. So they literally pitch a tent up on a roof where, you know, the citizens would see, there's a tent there, and you'd be able to see that's Absalom there, and in he goes with one wife, you know, goes again with another one. We know exactly what's going on there. Disrespect, utter, I mean, I can't even describe this kind of utter disrespect for his dad and for the people and for God. But Ahithophel, he, up to that time, usually was trusted to give really good counsel. And it was like talking, almost as good as talking like a prophet. But this is this guy's counsel. What happened to him? Why did he change? Well, I mean, literally, what happened? What's in it for him? Because even, I mean, he's...
Power.
I mean, what happened? Yeah, is it power? I mean, his reputation was stellar. He used to be, I mean, he was considered like, he had godly advice. He just gave satanic advice. What happened? Somebody said
Did
something.
I say that out loud?
Yeah.
I said he became a Democrat.
He became a Democrat. That was good. I'll take that. That's good. That's good.
He probably thought the other side was going to win.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, how often does that happen? And are we not seeing that now? I mean, how else do you explain all the turning? Again, unless there is some ruse that the Republicans are doing to throw off the dogs, to make way for some surprise, you know, make this some unsuspecting environment there. But it looks like, you know, they know they're going to lose, and all of a sudden they're throwing in with the Dems and saying, yeah, you know, go ahead and impeach them. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, it's amazing how quickly they've turned at the last moment. Why? Because they want to stay in power too, I'm sure, you know. If you could do this to Trump, I bet you could do it to me next.
Powerful cowards.
Powerful cowards, yeah. Well, I mean, they already said what, to Hawley and Cruz, you know,
Yeah.
no flights for you, and
Resign.
you know, I mean, they're coming after them. Well, if you're a powerful coward, you understand that if you can actually dethrone Donald Trump like this, well then, who are the senators, the Republicans? They're the House members. Somebody was going to say something?
Did you hear that a lawyer for PBS was in an interview and said that children of Trump supporters should be put in re-education camps?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that.
They fired him.
Yep.
They fired him?
Fired.
Yeah, he's no
Really?
longer with you.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
Within an hour of the video coming out.
I'm shocked that person was fired.
You'd have thought they'd give him a bonus.
Right. Wow, okay. That's a rarity. I won't expect to see that again, but that's great. All right. Now, Hushai, he's got different counsel. Somebody please, 5 to 14.
5 to 14.
What?
Chapter verses 5 to 4. Oh, we didn't read 1 through 4 yet. No, sorry, my bad.
Chapter 17.
Here's what else Ahithophel says to Absalom. This is interesting. First 4 verses of chapter 17.
Ahithophel said to Absalom, I would choose 12,000 men and set out tonight in pursuit of David. I would attack him while he was weary and weak. I would strike him with terror, and then all the people with him will flee. I would strike down only the king and bring all the people back with you. The death of the man you seek will mean the return of all. All the people will be unharmed. This plan seemed good to Absalom and to all the elders of Israel.
Yeah, this is the Judas of David's story that we talked about on Sunday and a little bit last Wednesday night. So he's out to kill David too. He says, hey, give me an army, I'll lead them, and, you know, we'll surround them, and we'll make it easy, and I'll slay them myself. Wow! Wow! He was a trusted advisor, you know, of King David. Now he says, I'll do the deed myself.
But I'll bring his army back.
Yeah, and then I'll bring, you know, everybody who's been with him, I'll bring him back, and everybody will be yours. Wow. 5 to 14, please, somebody.
Then Absalom said, now call Hushai the Archite also, and let us hear what he has to say. When Hushai had come to Absalom, Absalom said to him, Ahithophel has spoken thus. Shall we carry out his plan? If not, you speak. So Hushai said to Absalom, this time the advice that Ahithophel has given is not good. How far am I supposed to go?
14.
Moreover, Hushai said, you know your father and his men, that they are mighty men and they are fierce, like a bear robbed over cubs in the field. And your father is an expert in warfare and will not spend the night with the people. Behold, he has not hidden himself in one of the caves or in another, and it will be when he falls on them at the first attack that whoever hears it will say, there has been a slaughter among the people who follow Absalom. And even the one who is valiant, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will completely lose heart. For all Israel knows that your father is a mighty man, and those who are with him are valiant men. But I counsel that all Israel be surely gathered to you, from Dan even to Beersheba, as the sand that is by the sea in abundance, and that you personally go into battle. So we shall come to him in one of the places where he can be found, and we will fall on him, as the dew falls on the ground. And of him and of all the men who are with him, not even one will be left. If he withdraws into a city, then all Israel shall bring ropes to that city, and we will drag it into the valley until not even a small stone is found there. Then Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the counsel of Hushai the Archite is better than the counsel of Ahithophel. For the Lord had ordained to thwart the good counsel of Ahithophel, so that the Lord might bring calamity on Absalom.
All right. What happened? Absalom wants another advisor. Yeah, right? I want a second opinion.
Yeah.
And he calls for Hushai, who says,
Do the opposite.
yeah, I got a better idea. Ahithophel's idea is really not, that's not going to work. Because, you know, your dad, he's a valiant warrior. I mean, he's got experience. I mean, don't forget, we're talking about your dad. And, you know, this is probably what your dad's already doing. Knowing him, he's not even with the troops, so even if you go see where the fires are, whatever, and the bigger group of people, you can see, okay, he must be you're not even finding him. Because he understands he's a target. So he's going to be scarce. It's easier to hide one person than 100. Right? So he's going to hide himself. What else?
Well, the Lord thwarted the whole idea. Thwarted what Absalom was going to do.
Yeah. But Hushai, he says, he has another idea. I mean, he says, verse 9, even now he's hidden himself in one of the pits or in some other place, I'm sure. And when some of our troops fall at the first attack, whoever hears it will say, there's been a slaughter among the troops who follow Absalom. It just, word's going to spread, oh, we're losing. Then even the valiant warrior whose heart is like the heart of a lion will utterly melt with fear, for all Israel knows that your father is a warrior, and that those who are with him are valiant warriors. Right? I mean, they are. It's like they're going to try to hunt down the Spec Ops team. We're going to go hunt down the head of the SEALs and Navy SEAL, SEAL Team 6.
We're going to win.
Who really wants to do that? So, he goes, I don't think you're up for the task. But so what does he say? Yeah, if you want to win, you better call out, you better get an army if you're going to win. And why don't you go yourself? I mean, if you really want to do this, you should be leading it, right? Don't pitch this to Ahithophel, all right? And interesting is also this little verse there, 14, for the Lord ordained to defeat the good counsel of Ahithophel so that the Lord might bring ruin on Absalom. Okay? Now look. So now, where are you at? Do you think Hushai is a bad guy? I mean, he's just telling Absalom how to win. Now this, all I can tell you is that I looked at this, I want to look at this again because I'm praying this is what's going on with the president somehow. Counsel's been given, guy goes, I'm with you. I was with David, but now I'm with you. Here's how we're going to get it. Here we go. Verse 15, somebody to 26. It's a long one.
Then Hushai said to Zadok and Abiathar the priests, thus and so Ahithophel advised Absalom and the elders of Israel, and thus and so I have advised. Now therefore send quickly and tell David, saying, do not spend this night in the plains of the wilderness, but speedily cross over, lest the king and all the people who are with him be swallowed up. Now Jonathan and Amaz stayed in Rogel, for they dared not be seen coming into the city. So a female servant would come and tell them, and they would go tell King David. Nevertheless, a lad saw them and told Absalom. But both of them went away quickly and came to a man's house in Beroth, who had a well in his court, and they went down to it. Then the woman took and spread a covering over the well's mouth and spread ground grain on it, and the thing was not known. And when Absalom's servants came to the woman at the house, they said, where are Amaz and Jonathan? So the woman said to them, they have gone over the water brook. And when they had searched and could not find them, they returned to Jerusalem. Now it came to pass after they had departed that they came up out of the well and went and told King David and said to David, arise and cross over the water quickly, for this has Ahithophel advised against you. So David and all the people who were with him arose and crossed over the Jordan. By morning light, not one of them was left who had not gone over the Jordan. Now when Ahithophel saw that his advice was not followed, he saddled a donkey and arose and went home to his house to the city. Then he put his household in order and hanged himself and died, and he was buried in his father's tomb. Then David went to Mahanaim, and Absalom crossed over the Jordan, and all the men of Israel with him. And Absalom made Amasa captain of the army instead of Joab. This Amasa was the son of a man whose name was Jethro, an Israelite, who had gone into Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, sister of Zeruiah, Joab's mother. So Israel and Absalom encamped in the land of Gilead. Now it happened when David had come to Mahanaim that Shobi, the son of Nahash from Rabbah of the people of Ammon, Maker, the son of Amiel from Lodebar, and Barzillai, the Gileadite from Roglim, brought
John from Hot Springs.
Huh?
John from Hot Springs.
Brought-
Dave from Spearfish.
Yeah.
Just kind of substituting.
Brought beds and basins, earthen vessels, and wheat, barley, and flour, parched grain, and beans, lentils, and parched seeds, honey and curds, sheep, cheese of the herd for David and the people who were with him to eat, for they said, the people are hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness.
Okay, what happened there?
A ruse.
Well, they had the two set out to give David information to run, cross the river, hide, coming after you. These two guys go out and they're after him.
some gal hide them in the well. When they're gone, she lets them out. It's David, tell them what to do, they take off. This guy, Ahithophel, says, oh, they don't want my advice. Well, he commits suicide. Doesn't make any sense, but that's what he did. So, Absalom amasses an army, puts the guy in charge, and they go chasing after him. But they've already retreated, they got support now, they're getting fed, they're in a much better defensive position.
Okay,
What I missed.
all right, that works. Well, why did Ahithophel hang himself? Again, Jesus' story needed to parallel David's story, since Jesus was coming as a shepherd, like David, as God said through Ezekiel, I'm going to send you David, my shepherd. And it's very interesting how we see that Ahithophel hangs himself, Judas hangs himself. Now, we read this because nobody followed his advice.
Well, he was a betrayer. He knew his number was up.
God did turn
He was going to die anyway. Somebody was going to
He
kill him.
had good advice, and Absalom followed his advice, went directly after David. David was in despair. He would have wiped him out, would have found him and killed him. They didn't. He didn't, like you said.
God's got better.
He knows if they didn't follow his advice and that he had turned against David, he wasn't going to live long anyway.
Somebody was going to kill him.
Yeah.
One side or the other, maybe both.
Okay, he felt like he had no way out. Okay, interesting. All right. Well, Absalom is going to die in chapter 18. It's very interesting how now the table turns. So, somebody please read first 5 verses.
David mustered the men who were with him and set over them commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. David divided the army into 3 groups, 1/3 under the command of Joab, 1/3 under the command of Abishai, son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, and 1/3 under the command of Ittai the Gittite. King said to the men, I myself will also go out with you. But the men said, you shall not go out, for if we flee, they will not care about us. If half of us die, they will not care about us. But you are worth 10,000 of us, therefore it is better that you send us help from the city. The king said to them, whatever seems best to you, I will do. So the king stood at the side of the gate, while all the army marched out by the hundreds and thousands. The king ordered Joab and Abishai and Ittai, saying, deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom. And all the people heard when the king gave orders to all the commanders concerning Absalom.
So it wasn't a dead or alive thing. I want him alive. Bring him back. Deal gently with him. Okay. You know, David's somehow, he's offering grace to his son. You notice it? In verse 5. Would you?
Probably.
If it's your own kid.
Probably.
Maybe.
It's remarkable because other kings would kill their sons.
True.
There are so many kings, they did, the ancient kings like Herod, would kill their sons, threatened, they're threatened that those guys might take his throne, not David. He'd rather let his son kill him before he'd kill his son.
That is
It's pretty remarkable, isn't it? All right, so how about this? Somebody 6 to 18. Or in fact, Ryan, would you keep reading?
So the army went out into the field against Israel, and the battle was fought in the forest of Ephraim. The men of Israel were defeated there by the servants of David, and the slaughter was great on that day.
Okay, so David's troops gained advantage almost immediately, huh? Oh boy. Okay, keep going, sorry.
20,000 men.
Gee.
The battle spread over the face of the country, and the forest claimed more victims that day than the sword. Absalom happened to meet the servants of David. Absalom was riding on his mule, and the mule went under the thick branches of a great oak. His head caught fast in the oak, and he was left hanging between the heaven and earth, while the mule that was under him went on. A man saw it and told Joab, "I saw Absalom hanging in an oak." Joab said to the man who told him, "What, you saw him? Why then did you not strike him there to the ground? I would have been glad to give you 10 pieces of silver and a belt." But the man said to Joab, "Even if I felt in my hand the weight of 1,000 pieces of silver, I would not raise my hand against the king's son. For in our hearing the king commanded you and Abishai and Ittai, saying, 'For my sake, protect the young man Absalom.' On the other hand, if I had dealt treacherously against his life, and there is nothing hidden from the king, then you yourself would have stood aloof." Joab said, "I will not waste time like this with you." He took 3 spears in his hand and thrust them into the heart of Absalom, while he was still alive in the oak. And 10 young men, Joab's armor-bearers, surrounded Absalom and struck him and killed him. Then Joab sounded the trumpet, and the troops came back from pursuing Israel, for Joab restrained the troops. They took Absalom, threw him into a great pit in the forest, and raised over him a very great heap of stones. Meanwhile, all the Israelites fled to their homes. Now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and set up for himself a pillar that is in the king's valley, for he said, "I have no son to keep my name in remembrance." He called the pillar by his own name. It is called Absalom's monument to this day.
So, what happened?
Killed Absalom against David's wishes.
What do you think it means when it says the forest claimed more lives, more soldiers than the battlefield?
I had never noticed that before. Good question. I wondered if it was
Mosquitoes.
angelic.
Animals.
Maybe there was animals. The first thing I thought of was angels, in the woods, taking care of things. And
Heard
then the other thing was, what did you say?
Something about Democrats again.
Oh.
Democrat.
And the other thing was, like Absalom, he got his neck stuck in the tree.
It was terrain.
Yeah, there was.
They picked
They-
the battlefield to their
It
advantage.
was- Yeah.
Wild
There were a lot of
animals.
pitfalls, they would fall over cliffs.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, I guarantee if you go riding a horse through the Black Hills, and you don't know where you're going,
You're not going.
and it might be dark, you're gonna die.
Mhm.
You're running, if you're running pell-mell, yeah,
Yeah.
you're going down.
It's already sounding like God is directing things again. I mean, not sounding like God is obviously directing things against the army of Israel. So he can use whatever he wants: oak trees, hornets' nests,
Yeah.
caves, pits, sticks, whatever.
Wild animals, low branches. Yeah. Whatever. All right. So now we remember that Absalom has great hair, right? So that's one of the things we learned. Every time he'd cut his hair, 5 pounds of hair would be collected from the guy. Very strong hair, obviously strong enough to hang him, by. He got caught, somehow, and you can imagine he was kind of hanging there.
From his top knot.
And he was hanging there a long time. Now, I wonder, if you're hanging from, would that not, the weight of your body, would that not separate things? Would that not bust your axis up here? Would that kind of hang you? Or do you have to actually be hung under here to
To bust that.
can you, are you just kind of hanging?
Break.
I hate when somebody pulls my hair. That hurts. You ever have your hair pulled? Imagine hanging your whole body with your hair. And there he's hanging. That's probably, this is real funny to me. And word gets to Joab, hey, Absalom's hanging from a tree by his hair. You know, and Joab goes, really? Why'd you kill him? Well, because I was there when you were there, and David told you and everybody else, don't kill my son if you ever come up on him. Joab says, forget that. Right? I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, because the same guy says, and if I did kill him, I mean, if I killed him, David would have my head. If I didn't kill him, wait, no, how do you say it? Yeah, if I killed him, yeah, then you would you know, somehow, yeah, be aloof and point at me as a bad guy. You know? So Joab, he doesn't want to hear this. He didn't want to listen to reason. He goes, I'm wasting my time talking to you. I'll go do it myself. Now, what I don't understand is when he throws 3 spears in Absalom's heart, and I still didn't kill him. And so all these other guys got to come around and finish the execution.
I think he was dead. They just really wanted to.
Or did they just hack him up, or
They just wanted to.
did the guy miss and he just had 3 spears roughly here? I don't know, but either way, they made sure he was dead. Then what did they do with his body?
Just put it in a pit.
Covered with rocks.
Okay. Joab sounds the trumpet. Hey, battle's over. Come on home, everybody. They take Absalom. They throw him into a great pit in the forest. They raise over him a very great heap of stones. We're going to bury that body good. Now, Absalom, in his lifetime, had taken and set up for himself a pillar that is in the king's valley, for he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. He called the pillar by his own name. It is called Absalom's monument to this day. What does that say?
It's so important.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, he never had his own kid, his own sons. Here we go. David's going to hear about it. We're going to see what his response is. Are we still good? How are we doing on time? 7:54. Okay, somebody 19 to 23. We'll just take little bits at a time.
Now, Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, said, let me run and take the news to the king, that the Lord has delivered him from the hand of his enemies. You're not the one to take the news today, Joab told him. You may take the news another time, but you must not do so today, because the king's son is dead. Then Joab said to Hushai, go tell the king what you've seen. Hushai bowed down before Joab and ran off. Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, again said to Joab, come what may, please let me run behind Hushai. Joab replied, my son, why do you want to go? Why, you don't have any news that will bring you a reward. He said, come what may, I want to run. So Joab said, run. Then Ahimaaz ran by way of the plain and outran Hushai.
Now, if you remember, I told you on Sunday, you know, there was no texts, you know, no phones. If you wanted news, you wanted news to travel, there were runners. Literally. That's how Absalom announced himself as king, and all these runners going ahead of him. Absalom's the king. It's not David anymore. Really? Because nobody knows, except, you know, they just believe what they hear. So there's 2 runners now that are going to bring news to David. And I don't know how fast you can read this, but if you want to keep going, take it to the end of the chapter. It's very interesting what happens.
While David was sitting between the inner and the outer gates, the watchman went up to the roof of the gateway by the wall. As he he looked out, he saw a man running alone. The watchman called out to the king and reported it. The king said, if he's alone, he must have good news. The man came closer and closer. Then the watchman saw another man running, called down to the gatekeeper, look, another man running alone. The king said, he must be bringing good news too. The watchman said, seems to me that the first one runs like Ahimaaz, son of Zadok. He's a good man, the king said. He comes with good news. Then Ahimaaz called out to the king, all is well. He bowed down before the king with his face to the ground and said, praise be to the Lord our God. He has delivered up the men who lifted their hands against my lord the king. The king asked, is the young man Absalom safe? Ahimaaz answered, I saw great confusion just as Joab was about to send the king's servant and me your servant, but I don't know what it was. The king said, stand aside and wait here. So he stepped aside and stood there. Then the Cushite arrived and said, my lord the king, hear the good news. The Lord has delivered you today from all those who rose up against you. The king said to the Cushite, is the young man Absalom safe? The Cushite replied, may the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise up to harm you be like that young man. The king was shaken. He went up to the room over the gateway and wept. As he went, he said, oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son.
You know, we can be sure part of David's grieving was guilt for creating the kind of man that Absalom was. We talked a couple of weeks ago about his sons and how they behaved, and some of it was like father, like son. There were just things that David could have done, should have done, that could have avoided this. It would have been how he would have been a father. And here he is grieving now. It's one thing to run from an enemy, it's another thing to run from your own kid. And then when to find out that your enemy's dead, who happens to be your kid, you're not really going to rejoice. You can imagine why I believe David is just, oh my gosh, is my son. I mean, again, he asked, if you come upon my son, don't kill him. Arrest him, but don't kill him. Because I'm sure he was still holding out for hope. Maybe I could still get reconciliation with my kid. And I know there's a lot of families, a lot of parents, who maybe in this room you still want reconciliation with a kid. And you're still hoping for it. And I don't know what happens when you read this and how you may feel. Is some of, if there's a riff, is it, how much of it's yours? Are you responsible for it? Can you still fix it? I mean, if you remember, David with Absalom was really slow in fixing it. Remember, when Absalom ran away after killing Amnon, his half-brother, for sleeping with Absalom's sister Tamar. David doesn't do anything. He doesn't go after Absalom. Like, oh my gosh. I mean, he grieves over the death of one son, Amnon. But he's not grieving, apparently, over the absence of his other son, who is alive still, Absalom. He's obviously not thinking, I wonder what Absalom's thinking. I wonder if Absalom is feeling incredible guilt right now. And if I go to him And we weep together over this whole thing. And everybody takes some responsibility because everybody was, as you look at the whole story, everybody's got some responsibility. I wonder if he could have repaired it. But, you know, bitterness starts to set in. And when it sets in with a kid, that can be really hard to fix. And I think when Absalom ran away, I think he was hoping what most kids do when they run away is somebody could have come find me.
Yep.
Is Daddy going to come looking for me? Is he going to come say, son, I love you anyway, I forgive you? The prodigal son story. You know, where's the father that comes and says, son, I know you sinned terribly, and you wounded me terribly, but I still love you and I don't want to lose you. Can we start all over again? You know, he doesn't do that. And then if you remember, it's Joab who says, you know, your son's kind of out there alone. You know, you think you want to repair things? Yeah. And then he tries to get things to get David motivated. David says, yeah, I do. Send for my son Absalom. Just get him home. And Absalom does what? He comes back into the city, but David never says, bring him here to me. And they still don't see each other. Apparently for another 2 years. So they're in the same city, they're in proximity, but there's still no restoration of the relationship. Gosh! Why? And then David finally, I mean, there's more pressure on him, and he finally gets Absalom. They greet, they weep, they cry, so sorry. And you know, that wasn't enough. And that was like all that happened. And then go on life as normal. I mean, there needs to be some counseling. You know what I mean? They need to sit down with somebody and talk about the dysfunction in their family. Not to sound clinical, but I mean, there's some problems. I mean, it'd be important for him just to, you don't need a counselor unless you can't bring yourself to do what you need to do. If you truly don't know what to do. But, I mean, he should know what to do. I tried to describe it briefly. Just love him and say, I don't want this. And there's forgiveness, and I love you. And let's start again. And let's work together and whatnot. And somehow, because of how it was done, Absalom got bitter, didn't he?
Very.
And that's when he starts to think, I should be king. And I think it's not because his dad was a bad king. Oh no, his dad was great. Everybody loved him. That probably ticked him off too. So he starts to think, I'm in competition with my dad. Sometimes that happens. He goes, okay, I'm going to be a better king than my dad. How am I going to do that? I got to win the hearts of everybody. And then he starts to, as you know, for 4 years, he starts to win the hearts of the country. And he does it very well. It's not genuine. He doesn't have a genuine concern. He literally doesn't have the heart of his dad. Sorry. As much as you want, you don't have it. He does not have his father's heart. Everything he's doing, he's faking it because he wants to gain an advantage. He just wants dad's position. It's like a way of getting back at dad. And maybe trying to prove that he's something. Because so far, his legacy is going to be pretty rough.